Okay, so the second case study for overpopulation is Sao Paulo in Brazil. You'd be happy to know that the Sahel one is the longest one, so we should get through these next two pretty quickly. For those of you who are not aware, this is Brazil. If we were doing regional geography, you would be a lot more familiar with it, but most of you only know it probably because the Amazon rainforest is there. This here, obviously because it's in red, is the location of Sao Paulo. So this is one of Brazil's biggest towns. And actually, if you remember back to population density and distribution, the factors that increase it, one of the things that we said about Brazil was because it was colonized by the Portuguese, here they are coming in their boats over the sea, that they settled along the coast, so that there's much higher population densities in this region here because it was colonized by Portugal. Anyway, side note. Right, so what is happening in Sao Paulo? So Sao Paulo is one of the richest cities in Brazil, and as a result, it attracts a huge amount of migration from rural parts of the country. So it's a city of currently 12 million people, and actually I just noticed in your notes I haven't updated those, and I've written 11 million. Now, it won't really matter in an exam situation, but if you think about it. So this is on page 66 of your notes, change 11 million to 12 million. It's the third largest city in the world. Actually, Brazil itself is the fifth largest country in the world. It's got really high population density, 7,212 per square kilometre. That is absolutely huge. Considering population density in Dublin doesn't really rise up and above 1,000 per square kilometre. It's the 10th richest city in the world, and one of the richest cities in Brazil. So there's a huge amount of economic divide. It's got absolute massive wealth living beside poverty here. It accounts for 12% of Brazil's GDP. So GDP means gross domestic produce, so everything that's produced by a country. So of all of the exports and all of the money made by Brazil, 12% of that comes from one city of Sao Paulo. And in the past, this was based on the coffee trade, but manufacturing industry then grew up, and now it's a really, really important business centre, and it is the centre of finance in Brazil. This has led to many urban problems. Okay, the fact overpopulation, I mean, has led to many urban problems, not the fact that it's a business centre, and these are manifested in the favelas. So the favela is the Brazilian equivalent of a shanty town or a slum. So when you did India for junior cycle, you would have called them busties. When we looked at Haiti, you would have seen the tent cities. So in Brazil, they're referred to as favelas, and the very fact that there are favelas means that there is overpopulation, because if you have people living in a shanty town with not enough access to decent shelter, to electricity, to water, then they don't have an adequate standard of living. So in Sao Paulo, there are not enough resources to support this population of 12 million people. A third of the 12 million people living in Sao Paulo are living in favelas. So it is definitely an area where there is overpopulation, because if a third of them are in favelas, then a third of them, almost 4 million people, the same population of Ireland, are living in poor living conditions. Right, so this is downtown Sao Paulo, and you'll see very built up city. This is the business centre here. This is Avenue Paulista. It's the main avenue that runs through Sao Paulo, and if we just zoom out a little bit from this picture, oh no, there should be another image there. Hang on a sec. Nope. Don't know what happened. Anyway, that is downtown Sao Paulo. Right. In this case, the main cause of overpopulation is population growth. But population growth results from migration, mostly. Now, this is in contrast with Sudan and the Sahel, where population growth mostly resulted from high birth rates. So if you have a look here at population movement, okay, so there's a huge amount of rural to urban movement. I want you to focus on the green and the red lines, and the red line is probably the most important one. So the red line represents migration from the poorer northeast to the richer southeast. So most people up here, there's a more difficult climate. It's very difficult to farm. People don't own their own land, so there's a lot of rural poverty in this part, the northeast of Brazil. So the push factors here would be basically lack of job opportunities and poor standards of living. So a huge amount of people then move into Sao Paulo. So drought is an issue. Difficult farming conditions because the climate's a lot harsher. They don't really have healthcare services. It wouldn't be great education, and a lot of the time the workers don't own their own land, so it's not conducive to staying there and settling there with a family. So there's a huge amount of movement into Sao Paulo. There's also rural to urban migration from the south of the country, but most of the migration is happening in this direction here. And what happens is that one person moves down, gets settled, builds himself or herself a little shelter in the favela, and then says, right, come on, sends the cousins, they come, etc., etc. So most of the migration is from the northeast, and this is because of drought, poor farming, difficult farming conditions, and a lack of services. They're coming into Sao Paulo, again that should be over 12 million, basically to access jobs and to access services. So there are plenty of jobs in Sao Paulo, there's loads of opportunity, there are good services, there's good education, and there's good healthcare, but what they don't have is proper housing and proper housing facilities. So they don't have enough of that to cater for 12 million people, and this is why the favelas have built up. Okay, and favelas are basically a manifestation of overpopulation. There's a very fancy phrase. Manifestation means the kind of physical evidence of it. So the very fact that there are favelas means that overpopulation is an issue here. Now, this is the thing I thought would appear earlier. So if you see this is Sao Paulo, and you can see it's made up of a lot of kind of mini urban areas, but in amongst those urban areas are favelas. They're just squeezed in absolutely everywhere. And what's happened is because there's too many people here, 12 million people, there's not a good enough standard of living for everybody. So the people living in the favelas lack basic services. They don't have clean water, rubbish isn't collected, there's open sewerage systems, there isn't proper sanitation. So those people are proof that in these shanty towns are proof that there's overpopulation. And this will give you a bit more of an insight. Oh, forgotten about this funky music.
In the shadows of skyscrapers, in the heart of the wealthy district of Morumbi in Sao Paulo, lies a crowded and crumbling shanty town called a favela. This is one of Sao Paulo's infamous favelas. It may look pretty threatening from the outside. It certainly has its reputation. But what we discovered when we walked around is that people were actually rather hospitable. They're just trying to make a better life for themselves. All along these narrow streets, children jump on their parents' backs or ride tricycles. Some even wave hello to the camera. This is a look at life in just one of dozens of favelas that have sprung up in Sao Paulo, Brazil's largest city with an estimated population of 19 million. The favelas have become a symbol of Brazil's economic inequities. This is a country where 34% of its people live below the poverty line, so the struggling lower classes end up here in homes made of scrap materials.
34% of people live below the poverty line, okay? So in a city of 12 million, again, I said that earlier, about 3 to 4 million are living below the poverty line. So that's a good statistic to have.
Like wood or metal sheeting. There's no city contracted sewage or waste collection, so garbage just sits in the streets.
Eu moro e trabalho na favela.
I live and work in this favela for 9 years.
This is Aparecida Araújo. She admits life inside the favela isn't exactly comfortable.
Tem barulho, tem goteira.
There's a lot of noise, there are leaks, it's very uncomfortable. It's right next to the street, so it's very noisy and uncomfortable. There is no choice, I had to live here.
Right, what I basically was interrupting your one there was she actually lives in quite a nice favela. So they're going to show you around a bit, but some of them are way worse than this.
The 9-year-old single mother works in this tiny store selling beer, liquor, and candy. Though she won't show us her home, Aparecida does agree to take us inside her sister-in-law's living quarters behind the store.
Que é uma cama, aquilo dali é uma televisão.
It is a one-room, dirty and cluttered living space with a bed, small television set, sink and stove. Children's clothes hang from the ceiling. They belong to 5-year-old David, who doesn't let this life or our camera interrupt his playtime. This room is divided into a kitchen with a shower over there, says Aparecida. She also says the bedroom is infested with rats, so the cats come in pretty handy. As for the dogs, they're both pets and protection. The entire store and home smells of animal waste. There's no window for ventilation, just this one dusty fan that circulates the same stale air. But unlike other favelas...
Sorry, just like imagine... Oh, there's a toilet. Imagine COVID. Well, you don't need to imagine it, because this is what happened in Brazil. Like, COVID getting into these favelas is just going to spread like absolute wildfire. Anyway, there's another depressing thought.
Here, there's running water and electricity. I ask if it's difficult to live like this.
There are places that are the same size where up to 10 people live in the room.
Around the corner, this man invites us to walk through his neighborhood.
Now me. I sleep in here.
Though favelas have a reputation for being dangerous and infested with drugs, this favelado, the name given to residents of favelas, says his neighborhood gets a bad rap, and the press is partly to blame.
Everybody here is nice. You come in here by yourself and there is not going to be any problem.
In high definition for VOOM HD News, I'm Jennifer Santiago in Sao Paulo.
Okay, you get the idea. Right, what can be done to fix this? So one thing that has happened in Sao Paulo is that they have tried to upgrade the favelas, and this has been the government's approach to tackling the problem of overpopulation. So they basically set up self-help schemes in which they meet with the residents, and they give the residents the materials and the money that they need to make the improvements, and they encourage the residents to take control. So these are before and after pictures of upgrading favelas. So this is the same street before or after. Okay, so again, the materials are provided by the government, but the residents have to take control of doing the actual changes. So you can see here we've had a proper house built. This area here has been fenced in, and now they're growing stuff on it, so massive changes. Here we would have had like drains and kind of people's houses coming out to the back of there. Here it's all been walled out. Again, open sewerage running through the favela here. What they've done here is build a playground. They've blocked off the drain so people can't access it, or animals can't access it. So massive improvements have been made. Now, the reason why this was a success was because of this. The locals were consulted about the scheme before it was started. So previously, when they tried to improve the favelas, it didn't work because they didn't involve the favelados, so the people who lived there. So in this case here, what they did is they organised community schemes. They got the residents involved, and it was much more successful at tackling the problem of overpopulation because the locals are consulted and they get a vote on what changes are to be made and what best suits them. So it's a consultative approach to upgrading. The government will supply the materials, but the residents themselves take control, and this means that they're buying into it and that there's much more chance of success in the future. So locals taking care of their environment. So this is after the initiatives. You can see that not just that the change is being made, but they're also maintaining the areas by washing and cleaning and washing down the streets, and they're all very happy about it. These pictures would have you believe. Alright, so let's very quickly recap on this. So overpopulation case study is Sao Paulo. Okay, we should probably fit it all in here. In this case, the cause equals rural to urban migration. Okay, mostly from the northeast of Brazil, where conditions are very difficult. Okay, the effects are basically growth of favelas, inadequate or poor living conditions, living conditions. Okay, why are they inadequate? They're inadequate because lack of sewerage, clean water, space, electricity, I'm going to say safety, because contrary to what your woman said, they are riddled with organised crime and drug trafficking. Okay, there's a really brilliant movie called City of God about the favelas. It's amazing if you can watch that too. Alright, then the solutions, okay, are the self-help schemes that mean upgrading environment in consultation with residents. Okay, so that is a summary of overpopulation in Sao Paulo. I'm not going to read through it in your booklet, you can do that yourselves. It's a nice short one on page 66 to 67.